What is your opinion about Bramley's book?
Bramley's book, I thought, was an excellent book because it brought the atmosphere of what the fighting was like, terrible confusion for everyone concerned in those battles. And the battle he particularly referred to, the Battle of Mount London, was a very nasty one. The Argentine army was well dug in. There weren't as many as expected, but the British had a very difficult attack. They didn't have artillery. They hoped for supplies, and at the very beginning of the assault on the mountain, a corpse on a mine, it blew up, and there was no surprise. I think that coloured the battle from there on. It actually, although recognised generally in Britain, I think it was the most difficult battle of the whole campaign, including the terrible fighting on Mount Tumbledown. So it's an excellent book, written from the point of view of a fighting soldier who was there. But he's not a professional journalist. He is not used to recording and checking events, and that is going to be the centre of this case, if the case about the shot Argentine soldiers comes to court, comes to judgment. So there's a very strong probability it will.
What happened with the investigation now?
Now, investigation in terms of English law is very interesting. It is rather difficult because something unusual has happened here. If it's a case of military discipline, and this was an army, full operations for war, but the problem is the war had not been declared, then it is usually done by what is called the Provost branch, Provost military justice branch. But in fact, such an allegation, such accusations, such suggestions raised by the Bramley book are regarded as serious that, interestingly, they've brought Scotland Yard, the famous detectives of the criminal investigation branch, in to examine the whole story. Not only because it's 10 years ago, but it shows that it is being taken seriously. And under English law, a journalist cannot discuss this openly, the rights and wrongs, the whys and wherefores, did it happen, in case it would prejudice a jury. Because if a jury, which could be drawn from any one of my colleagues here, for example in the Daily Telegraph, if they heard me, as we say, talking out about it, then that would colour his judgment. And that is why it is extremely difficult for an investigating journalist now to get to the bottom of what happened that night on Mount Longdon.
Okay, why Bramley is not talking now?
Bramley's own history seems to be extremely interesting because he was rather a passionate man. Oddly, like many soldiers, that he seems to have read quite a bit, and he could write quite well. And soldiers, actually, I've noticed in going to 7 anti-terrorist campaigns, soldiers and top cops, top policemen, actually read a lot. They do know quite a bit about the world. So Bramley himself is an interesting man, but Bramley is not allowed to talk about it. It is that he won't talk. He is not allowed to talk about it because everything he says will now become part of the case if it goes to a full trial, a full process of criminal law.
The last one, can you see American soldiers in Malvinas War?
This is an interesting one. As the great Clausewitz, the father of modern strategy, wrote about, one of his favorite concepts is the fog of war, the confusion when a lot of men, and nowadays some women, are moving all over the battlefield. In every conflict, that whether it's a terrorist campaign or a war or a rather formal campaign like the Malvinas, Falklands, there is always rumour. And the rumours were all over the place about who was doing what and where, and what our special forces were up to. You wouldn't believe it. They'd reinvented the wheel and gone back to using bows and arrows, if you believed half of what the press was writing. Rumours always persist that there are mercenaries. I have talked to battalion commanders, and particularly the one at Longdon, and I don't think this is prejudicial, and they say they have no firm, independent evidence. There were, if I may say so, the Argentine army was a very mixed bag. There were some excellent soldiers, very well led, and some very, very good officers indeed. And it should be no surprise that they could speak to us in absolutely perfect English, almost better than our own. And certainly I came across at various stages, even while the campaign was on, not only after the conclusion of hostilities, extremely courteous, correct, highly intelligent, very well educated Argentine officers who spoke English as well as I do.
Thank you very much.
Mm.